This episode is brought to you by Sterling Financial Management. If you've left teaching to start your own business, whether it's tutoring, coaching, consulting, or something creative, we're here to help you grow it with confidence. From bookkeeping and tax returns to full financial strategy and virtual finance office support. We help service-based business owners get clear on their numbers and plan for profit. No jargon, no judgment, just smart financial guidance from a team that really gets it. Find out more at sterling-financialmanagement.co.uk. Download some of our helpful guides for starting out and take the stress out of your business finances. Welcome to Leave Teaching and, the podcast that's all about transformation and new beginnings, with Ruth Laqui, Lindsay Fekete and myself, Carrie Ann Booth. If you're a teacher or educator who's had enough of the classroom grind and are ready to discover a whole new way to earn, live with freedom and enjoy an excellent quality of life, you're in the right place. Throughout this series, we'll be discussing a range of topics aimed at helping you leave teaching and start a business, inspiring you with real life stories, strategies and guidance. Today we're thinking about whether or not actually leaving teaching is right for you. So if you're thinking you're burnt out, you're unfulfilled, you're overwhelmed, that you've really just had enough of being in the classroom, what are you going to do next? You're probably filled with fears and insecurities, and we're going to have a little think about today how we overcame our fears and what we can do to help you. And I think it's really important that you have a well thought out plan, maybe a plan A, B and C, to help you overcome those fears and get on your path to a new, better future where you're a bit more in control of your life. We want to swat out those anxieties and fill you with positivity. So what we're going to be thinking about today is I'm going to be asking us all two questions. What were your biggest fear and why? And how did you plan for that transition to leave teaching and do something else? So we'll start with Ruth. What was your biggest fear when you were considering that change, and how did you manage to overcome it?
So my biggest fear was definitely based around losing my career. So I think I touched upon this briefly in a previous episode where I'd worked so hard to work my way up to a senior leadership position at quite a young age. You know, I literally qualified at 21. At 26, I was assistant head. 28, I was deputy head. And the thought of not being able to go back, because the reason why I left was because I couldn't get flexible working around my children, was, oh my goodness, like everything that I've worked hard for in my career, all that time at university, all that effort I put into, if I left, that would be it. And I can remember an executive head saying to me previously how she thinks that people who go part-time are like giving up on their careers, people who leave, like I had that like in my head, genuinely, that they are the types of things, the conversations that I had been around, that I had heard. So I was petrified that I would lose that, because that was a part of me. I adore my children and I love being their mum, as my Instagram name is like my mummy teacher. Like that is a huge part of me. But also having my career was a huge part of me and always have been. Like I could, you know, some people can go full into being a stay-at-home mum and that is what they do. Even if I didn't need a job or whatever, I wouldn't have done that. I would have done something, because I would be like, well, even now, like I run 3 businesses, I'm on the PTFA, I'm a governor at a school. I am one of those people that likes to do something. It's a part of me. So for me, one of the biggest fears about going beyond the classroom was losing part of my identity, was losing that career. And also, what on earth do I actually do? Because my degree was a degree in teaching. It was a bachelor's in education. So I didn't really even have anything else to fall back on, where it wasn't like I trained in English, or I could go and retrain to be a journalist, or it was completely like, what would I do? So that for me was probably my biggest fear at that moment in time.
I think that's really interesting that you kind of picked up on, but didn't explicitly say it, that how toxic a workplace can be. And I'm not saying that all schools are like this, but you do have some management or some establishments that are really like, I don't know, negative and pushing for this and pushing for that. And I think sometimes they forget that actually teaching isn't your life and that your well-being is important, and that, you're allowed to have a family, you're allowed to have hobbies. And I think for me it's that balance, isn't it? And a lot of teachers just don't get that balance. They're just teaching, they are a teacher, that's all they think about even when they're not there. And it just becomes all consuming. And you can understand why we're losing so many great teachers. It's absolutely crazy, isn't it?
You're almost in this like microcosm of society. When you're in your school, you are in that small environment, and actually even within one school you can be so indoctrinated to think, like, I genuinely had those thoughts in my mind that if I go, I am giving up on my career. They were genuine things, because one executive head teacher had that opinion that was toxic, that was not true, but that was all I knew at that point in time. And if you're in a school now, that little school environment is the world to you. It takes quite a while to step out and suddenly realise, oh my goodness, the world is a big place. Because we think the thing that we go to day in, day out, and this is where growing a business is really key, is getting the right people around you. And the sooner you can do that, because the right people, although this doesn't sound quite nice to say, won't necessarily be your family, won't necessarily be your friends, and won't be your current colleagues. To grow your business, to change, to go in a new direction, you're going to have to find your new network to really grow as well.
I think you're absolutely right. I think you do. I think you have to surround yourself with people who understand your new world, because it's not teachers, it's not teaching assistants, it's not the head teacher. It's a completely different ball game, isn't it? And I think you need people who are going to be encouraging, they're going to push you. I think you need to be surrounded by people who you can maybe aspire to be like as well. And you're right, it's really difficult because so many of your friends, family, your partner, your current colleagues, they just think you're making a massive mistake. Why would you give up that safe job? Why would you give up the security, the pension, the holidays, the this, the that? And they just cannot see that all the negatives and how you might be feeling inside. So, it can be a leap of faith, and sometimes you're going to be doing that without your nearest and dearest necessarily supporting you. So I think it is really important that you go and find
Yeah.
your people, go and find a community who are going to lift you up and tell you, actually, yes, it is going to be okay. You can do it. And look at all these other wonderful people who are doing exactly that. And yeah, that's what you need to do. Totally agree.
And by listening to this, you're taking that step in the right direction. You absolutely are already, you're already on that path of doing that.
Lindsay, what were your biggest fears when you were, well, thinking about teaching or being forced to leave teaching? Like, what were you worried about?
So I think because like I totally felt like the decision was taken off me. I don't feel I was like a little bit different from Ruth in that I just knew I had to go. I didn't have that. And in a way it made it a bit easier because I didn't have to like think, is this the right thing or the wrong thing? I just knew I had to leave because I'd burnt out. But the as Ruth was saying about the identity thing, my fear was not necessarily about losing that fear of like losing that identity. For me, it was I felt such a failure. I felt like I had completely failed in my job. I was anxious and worried about like what people would think of me, and like that they would just think, well, everyone else can do it. I felt really alone, actually. I felt like no one else was feeling that way, and it was just me. I don't think it's talked about in schools when you're, that you're anxious and worried and stressed. I think it's sort of, it's just not a common conversation. Everyone just sort of knows that's how we're feeling, but I don't know, maybe it was just sort of the schools that I was in, but throughout my teaching career, we didn't really talk about that. And I just felt like I was a massive failure. And I think because I felt like a failure, anything that was said that was sort of maybe not meant in that way, that's how I took it on, that people maybe would perceive that I had failed in my career. And I was really confused. Like, I didn't understand why I couldn't cope and everyone else seemed to manage to. And I didn't know anyone else that had burnt out. I didn't know anyone else that had left teaching openly through work-related stress, especially not necessarily like at the senior leadership level. So I felt just pretty alone with it, to be honest.
I think you're right as well, Lindsay. I think there's a massive comparisonitis in schools, isn't there? And you think, well, if everyone else is managing, no one else is off sick, like what am I doing wrong? Why am I doing it so badly? And you've almost got those, and it's no offense to any of the teachers, because we're all just working really hard and doing our best, but you look round at those teacher martyrs whose books have been marked 5 times in 1 week, and the reports are written a week before a deadline, and I'd be there like 1 minute to midnight still writing my reports, and you think, like, why am I so crap at this? Is it my organization? Is it my work rate? And you just think everyone else is doing it. Why am I so bad at it? But now we're out of that circle, I can totally see that not everybody else is doing it. There's lots of people struggling, or either, some people take a back seat as well. You've got the opposite of the teacher martyrs, the ones who do just turn up and just do the bare minimum and just try and get through the day. And they were the people I were told to avoid when I first started school. They were like, oh, don't sit next to them in the staff room. He's a miserable old git, or she's a miserable old cow. They're so cynical, they're so this, they're so that. And I remember when I first started teaching, I was like, I'm never going to be like that. Super positive. Everything's going to be great. And it wasn't long, maybe 3-5 years down the line, I was sat in the staff room going, oh, I don't think I can handle another initiative. What do you mean I've got to mark with 3 different coloured pens? And it's like, yeah, it's just the constant having to achieve and having to be as good as what you perceive everyone else is doing. So yeah, it's absolutely crazy, isn't it? I think for me, one of the fears about leaving teaching was a bit like Ruth. It was my career. It's all I'd ever wanted to be. But also I was the main earner. So it was kind of down to me to pay the mortgage, to pay the bills, to put the food on the table. Like, any money that my husband earned was like, well, that's kind of our fun money. But, if he loses his job, it's fine. Like, my money covers everything. And, when I left teaching, I didn't have any savings. And I was like, if this goes wrong, like, we can't pay the bills. It wasn't like I didn't have anybody supporting me. I didn't have a rich husband or a rich family that actually, if it went wrong, somebody could bail me out. It was like, it was all or nothing. And I think that's what I found really scary. I'm not quite sure how I totally overcame that. I think a few different tactics, and we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah.
It's really interesting what you were saying about teacher martyrs, and also about people that perhaps seen as like the negative ones, because I always found, and I know this isn't the case across the board, but for me it was the teachers that really, really cared about what observation feedback they got, about I really, really need to get these books marked because that's the deadline and I really need to try and do it. Like, over the top cared, that were quite often the ones that burnt out the first, and then ultra felt like a failure because they're like, I care so much and I always make sure that I've done everything, and yet other people are still cracking on and I'm here absolutely not. And I think that was me at one point in my career. I sort of had to tell myself, it's because I care too much about doing this impossible job 100%. And so it's such a mindset shift. That's just where I sort of came from, thinking about that and then this is what helped me in business as well. I was like, the amount of care, the amount of time, the amount of effort that I put into that, if I put that into my own business, what can I achieve? And that showed me that I had it in me to do it. I just needed to do it for myself. So that's what I did.
That's it, isn't it? We'll talk about those 50, 60 hours a week in teaching, and it's just exhausting. And don't get me wrong, there are weeks where I've worked 50, 60 hours, but it just feels like I'm doing it for something better. I'm doing it for myself. Like 60 hours working on my own business is worth so much more than 60 hours working for somebody else. But the good thing is I don't work 50 or 60 hours every week at all. I get to choose my own hours as well. And the other point you were making, it's an absolute occupational hazard, isn't it? There's no way you're going to go into teaching and working with children if you don't actually care about them. So you're always going to have them at the forefront of everything you do. And I think you've already mentioned it, Ruth. We care that much about all these other people's children that it's to the detriment of our own children as well. And it's absolutely bonkers that, like, we come home exhausted, flop on the couch, and we think it's okay to then not play with our own children because we've exhausted ourselves playing with everybody else's children. And I think it's just refreshing that now we've got that choice to kind of have that quality time with our families as well.
So every Sunday I would spend a day, especially like early on in my career, I would have a Saturday off and I would work on a Sunday. And when we used to have to do APP, I'm like showing my age now, but getting all the tabs in the books and all the evidence and like the hours, like early on in my career that I would spend on that. But now my weekends are with my family and my children, and that is it. That is all I do, just with them.
Yeah, that's it. Sunday evenings, Sunday afternoons, evenings. God, I would feel awful. I would get anxious. I would get depressed. The longer I left it, the more guilty I'd feel because I knew I should have been planning lessons and getting ready for the week ahead. And I don't think there's many teachers you'll speak to that don't get that Sunday night dread and that massive one you get at the end of the holidays as well. Lindsay, did you experience that?
I used to work like pretty much every Sunday afternoon, usually marking. And I think what Ruth was saying about like the APP, the amount, like, and linking that to the amount of hours that we do now, but it's not necessarily the hours that you do, it's what you're working on. You're working on something, like everything you do in your business, you choose to do. So like if I'm working too many hours, like I've got no one except me to blame for it because I've decided to do those things, but it's because I want to do those things and I enjoy them. Whereas it was so tick boxy, it was annotating your plans to show that you like the outcome of the lesson before you did the next lesson, and then highlighting things in books. I remember in one school I was in year 6. I taught in year 6 for a lot of my career, and I spent hours and hours and hours highlighting things to prove that children were at the expected level for writing in their year by the end of their year 6, with little tabs and things to show it, and that was not anything because I thought it was going to help the children. It was because the school that I was in at the time was due to be moderated, and I just needed to have the proof that what I was saying about the level of this children's work was right. And we didn't get moderated that year. So what a waste of time was that? I could have just spent that time planning amazing lessons and or having even just a little bit more energy to do things with my own children. But there was so many things that like I did in school because that was the expectation. And to be honest, I didn't really question a lot of it. I felt like that was what was expected, so I did it. There was a couple of things that I was like, I'm not doing that. I really disagree with that. But generally I was quite conformist and I did it because, that's what you did. That's what you have to spend your time doing. And that's different from spending like lots more hours doing something on your own business because you believe in it and you enjoy it, or you think it's the right thing for your business.
It's crazy, isn't it? All these initiatives and things we had to stick in or tick just to prove that it was going to impact the children, when actually it was those things that didn't impact the children. And like you say, more time planning great lessons, delivering great lessons, and having those conversations with the children are what I think brought the children on. It was never the written feedback or ticking this box or labeling that box. So for people listening who are maybe petrified of leaving the classroom, are worried that they're maybe not going to be able to pay the bills, what would you say to them? So what did you guys do to plan your transition from the classroom into your business, and to make sure that all those fears and anxieties that you had beforehand didn't actually come true? So Ruth, what was your plan of action? How did you transition?
And so my fear obviously was losing my career. So I wanted to transition and get over that fear that I wouldn't lose my career. So for me, I made sure that what I went into was utilizing the skills I had as a teacher and my passion, the things within that I absolutely loved. And I actually started, I became an educational consultant, whereby I got to do all those things, but actually with a lot more people, as we've spoken about. I got to be like I do now regularly. I go in the media, in the national media. I've actually been in like the international media as an education expert. That's what they call you in the press. But talking about education. So my career as such went from being deputy head of a school to suddenly being like a voice in education that was respected in the national press, in the media, in the conferences that I do. Some of the brands that I work with are some of the best in education. So for me, one of like a sort of standout moment was when we always used to get the TTS magazines in school. And for years, like, you don't really think about it, but TTS are just amazing. And then when I saw myself and I was like the front cover of it, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is just so bizarre. Like, I thought my career would end, and yet here I am on the cover of the TTS magazine, going into like every single educational setting across the country. And now I'm a podcast host for one of them. I work really, really closely with them, and they're just one company. I'm hosting a conference in June with a colleague that's very high in academia. She works with lots of universities. I had a call the other evening with a university about doing some guest lecturing work. So actually, it didn't hinder my career at all. It just took it on a different path, and it's what you want. So I didn't want to lose my career, so what I've gone into ensures that I'm still doing all those things. I'm reading the research, I'm using the research, I'm promoting that, I'm sharing that, I'm supporting others to have that impact on their practice. So how I overcome it was stay true to yourself and keep looking for the opportunities. Like, that's the thing, I keep looking for it. Guest lecturing at university has always been something I'm like, oh yeah, that would be really good, because yet again, we're teachers, aren't we? I'm like, it would be really nice to go back and like be with the teacher trainers and talk to them about play and active learning and that sort of stuff. So I went and I had a conversation. I found somebody, I connected with them, we had a Zoom call. You get very good at asking questions, because that's what opens doors and leads to doors. Nobody is going to come and do it for you, but whatever it is that you want to achieve, you will be able to do. I like you, Carrie-Anne, you've been on like loads of television and the media as well. I was on like the BBC News, and it's just like mind blowing. But again, that would not have happened to me if I'd have stayed doing what I was doing. It gave me a platform by leaving and using my voice and talking about it. So overcome it by finding opportunities and creating opportunities yourself. Don't wait for somebody else to come and do that. You definitely need to have that go out and get attitude. And then in terms of like practical solutions, like a plan on how did I actually leave the classroom? I know that the three of us have got very different situations here. So I was actually on maternity leave, and we'd been used to like my husband's salary and then me being on maternity pay, which isn't that great anyway. So at that point, we just decided that we would make sacrifices, we would live within our means, and like my husband's salary would support us while I left, and while I thought about what I was going to do. And it's ironic, really, because now he's left and he works for me. We've like switched roles completely 5 years on. But that was the thing that we did. We made choices, we made sort of cutbacks, we lived very much within our means. But actually, you'll be amazed at what you spend money on that you don't need to as well when you look into it. You know, there's lots of little things like having all the subscriptions that you have, or looking at going out for coffees all the time. Can you like take your coffee in a little mug instead? These are like little switches that I do now in my life anyway, because I just think even when you've got more like a safety net of money, I don't want to waste money. Like, this is like a different mindset now completely. But now I'm like, I want to take that money and I want to invest it in this for my business, or I want to invest it in that, or I want just being, you know, respecting what you have, living within your means, and spending wisely, not being like willy-nilly as such, because I really wanted this to work. So I was happy to go without certain things while I was in that process.
I think that's really interesting. I think how you've gone from being like a leader in your school to now being like this authority on education and play is just incredible. And it kind of just shows you we've got all these wonderful skills that we use in school. We're amazing managers, we're amazing at running businesses, but we're doing that in that school environment. And when you break down those walls and get out, look at the opportunities you've created for yourself. And I totally agree with you. You have to be a go-getter. Like, it's one thing working in a school, and yes, you've got responsibility for the children, but you've not got responsibility for lots of other things. You've always got someone above you telling you what needs doing or what has to be done next. Whereas in your own business, like, you're not going to get into the newspaper unless you go and chase that journalist. You're not going to get on TV unless you make that phone call. So you do have to have a really positive, forward-moving attitude. And I think that's really, really important. And I think it's interesting how probably all of us would agree with this, that because we're really like laser focused on earning our money, it then kind of makes us laser focused on how we're using our money. So like hearing Ruth talking about investment rather than spending is a massive shift in mindset, isn't it? And like you said, doing the little things like not having the coffees, not having all of the subscriptions, because maybe you do want to go and travel around Thailand for 6 months, and it's like your agendas change, your money mindset changes, and I think it changes for the better, doesn't it? You become reliant on a teacher salary, and it just becomes expected and normal. Whereas when we're creating that money in our business, it's not that it's necessarily not stable, it's just we see every penny coming in, we know where every penny's going, and it just makes you, like you say, more respectful of the money and what we can do with it and what we can achieve with it when we do invest it in the right place, or we do, like, I don't know, start another business or pay for an advert and things like that. It's a really interesting way to look at it. Lindsay, how did you go from your situation then? What was your sort of transition story?
So I, because I wasn't planning on leaving, I didn't sort of have that that thought around like the backup of it, if you like. But I did have quite a long transition from knowing I was leaving to actually starting my business. So for me, it was about, although when I left, I felt like I was a failure. That wasn't what I was trying to like overcome when I first started my business. I was just trying to replace my income. That was like my sole goal, was to and in fact I was like, I don't want any more responsibility. I don't want to have to think about safeguarding. I don't want to have to think about children meeting certain targets and the pressure of things, and I just wanted to just have an easier life, I suppose. But because I knew that I was leaving from the October, and I'd asked to like reduce my hours, get rid of my deputy head responsibility as a coping mechanism so that I could stay till the end of the school year, then I gave myself, I bought back a bit of brain space, and that gave me a bit of time, which initially I was just job hunting. all the way up to Easter, I wasn't even considering starting a business. So I was just looking for other jobs, and looking for things that I could do. And then when I realized, I got to Easter and was thinking, oh my goodness, nothing is out there that I want, nothing fits what I want to do. Then I started to consider tutoring, and I started it on the 2 evenings that I was not in school. And I started like building up students. I don't know if I was consciously sort of thinking, right, if I build it up as much as possible now, when I leave, it can be my full-time business. It was just like I was just being as proactive as I could really about it. And I started having students for 2 evenings a week, and then was getting interest quite quickly. So as soon as I stopped, I then started tutoring, and that was like my full-time job, my full-time work. But what I did do was, I always had in the back of my mind, like, what will I do if I don't earn enough? So for me, it was supply. That seemed the obvious, but I really didn't want to do supply. I'd done supply before when my children started school. The school that I worked in was almost an hour's drive, but I'd worked there for a really long time. I'd been there for like 14 years and loved it. I loved being in that school. I would have probably stayed in that school forever. But when they went to school, I couldn't get them to school and get me to school. Like, I couldn't say, okay, I'll come in for 9:30, but can I leave at 2:30 so I can go like get my kids? And they were really little. They were like summer babies, so they were just 4 when they started school. And they both started together, and it was a bit of like a big deal that I'd gone from having like children at home, and they'd both gone to like empty nest sort of thing. And so I had to leave. I left that school because I couldn't stay there, and I did supply for about a year. And it just it wasn't awful, but it definitely wasn't my most favorite thing to do. And I was like, I know I can do it, I know what to do, but I don't really want to do it unless I have to. But I think having that backup plan just made me feel a bit more secure. But what I did do, and we've talked about the proactive, like both of you have talked about, I was really proactive in looking for work. So once I'd started my tuition business, I was sharing about the business on Facebook, but I was also going and speaking to, like, telling everyone I knew that I was tutoring. I contacted like my a local school to see if they wanted me to go in and do any work in there. I signed up to agencies so that I could get some work doing agency work, and I basically sort of got bits of work from different places at different times. Just anything that I saw that was an opportunity, I said yes to it. Every single bit of work that could come in, I said yes to, and I went and looked for it. And I was thinking a lot that first 12 months around, what else can I do? What else can I do? And I approached a school to see if I could do like an after school club, like a tuition after school club. So I really sort of, I worked probably as hard as I did when I was in school that first year, but I was really focused on like bringing in the income, and just making sure that I could like have that security really.
I think it's really interesting, isn't it, that you do have to put yourself out there. And I think if you're not having to leave the classroom abruptly for illness or whatever other reason, if you can start to build up something on the side slowly, it doesn't seem like that massive leap into the unknown. And I was lucky enough to be able to do that as well. But I also agree with what you're saying, Lindsay, is, initially get yourself out there, tell people about it. If you do start a business, you need to shout it from the rooftops, because nobody else is going to shout about your business and how good you are. That's your job. You have to do that. And I think you have to get comfortable with doing that as well. And I also think it's okay to leave teaching and do a different job. Like so many teachers, I don't know if it's status or job snobbery or whatever, but I think, if for whatever reason my business went under and I still have to pay the mortgage and put the food on the table, I would literally do any job to feed my family and to pay the bills. And I think sometimes you just need to remember that you have to do that. I remember the mindset when I was at university. I did bar work, I worked in a theme park, I was a Christmas elf, you know, I did everything. But in my head I was like, it's not forever, it's not forever, it's not forever, because I knew I was doing my degree and I was destined for greater things. But I think it's okay if you end up in that situation again. Like, you can have a part-time job or even a full-time job whilst you're stepping into something else, because it might be that the situation you're in right now is that awful that you just need out. And it might be that you do take another job or do several different things until you settle with what you're doing. And like Lindsay said, you know, you do say yes to a lot of things. You might say yes to all the work, and then you're like, oh my God, teaching was hard, but now I'm working even harder. But I think you've got to say yes to those things to find where your passion is, or where your niche is, or what you like doing the best. And eventually, you know, it might take 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, but you'll get to a point where you know what the right thing is for you, whether that is working for someone else or whether it's your own business. And even within your own business, you're going to have all those different audiences. And like for Lindsay, you might be, are you tutoring online? Are you tutoring one-to-one or in groups? And like for me, I've got different people I can work with, schools, brownies, adults, home education. And there's some parts of the job I prefer more than others, and that's what I'll push. Like, I'll go and work in the hotel because I know we're going to have a small group of children, and it's like you can start to pick and choose those things. But I think initially it's worth having that mindset that, you know, let's try a load of things first, say yes to the opportunities, because one of those opportunities might not have even been on your radar, and that might end up being the thing that you're really great at, that then brings you in loads of money as well. And I think it's, yeah, just having an open mind. It's like, you know, we are teachers, we've got some amazing skills that are transferable to loads of other things, and we're talking about that next episode, I think. But yeah, don't be restrictive. You know, you might not get a job in education, you might end up turning your hobby into a business. You might end up, you know, I've got a friend who left teaching who now has a really successful sewing business. She's got a subscription box and a club where other mums come and sew with her. And it's like, I think she was a PE teacher, and like she's turned her hobby into a business. And I think that's amazing. For me, the transition, I think I just touched on it a little bit. I wasn't leaping into the unknown. My business was, well, like I said, it started off as a hobby business at first. I was like, oh, this little thing that I'm trying on the side. It was never going to be the be all and end all, but you know, it slowly grew over like six or so years. So when I came to leaving, I was like, well, I've already got a sort of business there. It's already doing something. How can that be my main income? So, you know, I said it started off as birthday party entertainment. When I went down to 1 day a week at school, I was then able to go into schools to do shows, assemblies, workshops. I was then hitting those uniformed groups like brownies and scouts. And then as I was leaving, I was like, well, I need the regular income. Birthday parties and one-off bookings at schools just aren't going to cut it. So I was looking at ways that I could get into schools on a regular basis. And very quickly, it was the after-school clubs that kind of paid off for me. You know, you're in there every week. I do 3 after-school clubs each week. I refuse to work Friday afternoons and evenings. That's another great thing about running your own business. I get Friday afternoons is my golden time. I know that's a horrible word for primary school teachers, but I get to choose my own golden time every Friday afternoon. And that might be that I go to a coffee shop or the library, or, you know, I go for a little drive somewhere nice, or I go for a walk. And it's just lovely being able to do that. But yeah, I think just having that plan A, B, and C is brilliant. So yeah, I had my business that was already growing. Like all of us, there's always supply to fall back on. You know, whether you want to do it or not, it's definitely an option, and it's definitely a fallback plan. So signing up to those agencies, even though you might not want to do it, I think it's just another little, I don't know, like security blanket in the background just to keep you sane and feel a little bit safe. And there's other things you can do as well, and I'm not going to talk about it too much today because I know we're going to be talking about it in the future, but you don't just have to tie yourself down to one thing. Like Ruth has 3 businesses. Lindsay has, you know, she's got a tutoring and she helps tutors. I've got my business, which I've now franchised, and I've got my community, and there's other things that I do as well. So it's not about putting your eggs in one basket or all your eggs in one basket. It's about thinking a bit wider. You know, we're so used to having a job, we're so used to that one salary coming in every month that actually you just need to flip your thinking a little bit and see how you can be a bit more creative about earning your money as well.
I mean, obviously the title of this episode is Leaving Teaching Right for You. So from what we've all spoken about, I'd say it's 100% right for you if you're ready to go and get and really believe in yourself and push yourself. I mean, that's a bit ambiguous. Leaving teaching, is that right for you? There's loads of different things you could go into, but if you want to grow your own business, like leave teaching and go into a business like we've done, then I would say you need to be accepting of the fact that it can be a lonely place. You are going to have to go out and network. You are going to have to push through barriers. There are going to be hard moments, but the rewards for the time that you spend, as we've spoken about before, are tenfold. The graft that you go through, and like being an overnight success isn't a thing. Anybody who is successful has started at zero. Anybody who is successful has had failures or things that haven't worked as they'd like. And anyone who is successful has worked when you think they're not working as well. They've put the graft in. Like, it doesn't exist that you can go from here to here. So I think expectations are really key as well. Don't think that you will leave teaching and suddenly the life of your dreams is going to appear. We're like 5 years in. You're even more than that, aren't you, Carrie-Anne? Because you started while you were still teaching. So 8 years in, and then Lindsay, I know that you replaced your salary really quickly, but at this point now, you're a few years in as well. I don't know off the top of my head how many. So it's right for you if you know that it is there for you to take, but you've got to put the graft in, is what I would say. And if you don't want to put the graft in, then go and get a job in something else. Like, there's options, but running a business perhaps isn't the right one. What do you think about that?
For me, I think it's about thinking that whatever you do doesn't have to, or realizing whatever you do initially doesn't have to be forever. So like how we've talked about, well, you might do supply, you might do some agency work, you might go and get a part-time job somewhere else. Whatever you're doing, that is not like what you have to do if you don't want to for the next however many years. And because what I've realized now, so I'm like in my 4th year of business, what I realize is there are opportunities that have come to me, partially because I've said yes to lots of things and I've been open to them and I've looked for them, but also there are opportunities that there's no way I could have predicted. There's no way I could have predicted a year ago some of the things that I've done in the last year. So you just don't know what's coming your way. And I've changed my business. I've grown it one way. I've tried things, and we've all done that. We've all tried things and changed and evolved. So I think trying not to be like thinking too fixed, like I don't want to go and do this because I don't want to do this forever. I don't want to leave teaching to do this forever, because it doesn't have to be forever, and it might not look like that 6 months down the line.
And I think we're all big fans of trying it, failing fast and moving on, aren't we? It's like you don't know if you don't try. So many people that I speak to are like, oh, well, I'd like to do this, but if this happens and if it goes wrong and, oh, maybe I could do this. It's like, well, what's stopping you? What is stopping you from doing it? Like, have a go. If it works, brilliant. If it doesn't, try the next thing. And I think it's like overcoming that fear of not just giving it a shot. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I'd say. Have a go. What's the worst that can happen? I advertise my science parties. What's the worst that could happen? People might not have booked. Okay, I would have moved on and done something else. So I think that's the big takeaway, isn't it? You don't know unless you try, and it's okay to try a few things until you find your thing. And we're totally here for that and totally here to support you. So yeah. So I think on that then we'll wrap up. I think that was really insightful. Don't forget to subscribe. Come and find us all on social media. The links are in the show notes. And next time we're going to be looking at how all our teacher skills can be turned into wonderful things in business. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
You've been listening to the Leave Teaching and podcast with me, Ruth Aqui, Lindsay Peckety and Carrie-Anne Booth. If you've enjoyed our conversation today, don't forget you can follow us on socials to hear about future episodes, events and ways to help you leave teaching and start your own business.